Good morning. Thank you all for being here. It's an honor to be here with this new leadership team. Obviously, the challenges that face this leadership team, that face this legislature, that face this Commonwealth are numerous, and they're daunting. Today, there will be thousands more Kentuckians that will lose their jobs. They don't care who the governor is. They don't care who any single one of us are. They don't care who holds the majority in the House. They care how they're going to put food on the table, and they care about how they're going to keep their utility bills paid. Those voices are being ignored daily. We will be facing one of the most difficult sessions in history, certainly in modern history. But during every step of the way, during this upcoming session, those voices will be heard, and we will respect those voices, and we will be mindful of the struggles that these Kentuckians face on a daily basis. I can assure you that this majority will hear those voices and represent those people that are struggling every single day. Without a doubt, the top priority of this legislature will be the budget, one of the most difficult budgets we will ever face, during one of the most difficult times that we will ever face it. The underlying economy that we have built on for the last several years has been strong, and I think that is one of the major reasons that the revenues have continued to be strong coming into the state. Record job creation, record investment in Kentucky businesses, record revenues into the general fund prior to COVID. As you know, Kentucky collects its income taxes in arrears. So those revenues have continued to flow into the state on a relatively strong basis. Also undoubtedly bolstered by stimulus money and unemployment insurance, which have continued to enhance our revenues, and I think leading to some artificially elevated levels of revenue into the state that make, I think, a deceptively bright picture, and one that adds a great deal of uncertainty to the budget. The budget is going to be difficult for two reasons, or more than two, but for two main reasons. First and foremost, dollars will be tight. I don't think that there's any rational observation that would lead anyone to believe that the revenues are not going to be limited as we go into this budget cycle. Excuse me. The other is clarity. Again, with the distortion of revenues caused by the artificial stimulus, it is impossible to predict what those revenues are going to look like. The Consensus Forecasting Group is an independent body made up of very, very smart, great thinking people. I used to say that Stephen Rudy, when he was A&R chair, had the toughest job in Frankfurt this coming year. Without a doubt, the most difficult job of anybody is going to be on the table of the Consensus Forecasting Group. I have an economics background, and I've seen a lot of modeling, and there's no way to model what we are facing. And so they have an awesome responsibility on them. I know they will do a good job, and regardless of what they come with, we will craft a responsible budget that continues to build on the foundations that we have laid forth in the past, and that is to make investments where we can, but at the end of the day, to have Kentuckians working less for their government and more for themselves. And we will continue to build on that and pass a responsible budget. We've begun conversations with the budget director. I hope that is a signal that the administration is ready to go to work to tackle these difficult decisions in a professional manner. Obviously, as we come into session, we are ever mindful of the virus. We understand the seriousness of this virus, and we continue to consult with scientists and public health officials to understand the best path forward and protecting Kentuckians, getting Kentuckians back to work. And we will continue to make that commitment, continue to work with those officials, and hopefully begin working with the administration on the best way to get children back in school, to get Kentuckians back to work, and to get people back to living their lives. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Speaker Pro Tem Mead for a few more comments.
Well, again, thank you all for being here today. Without a doubt, the question that I get and most legislators I think are getting right now from constituents and citizens is about how much authority that the governor has in a state of emergency and what grants that power. Make no mistake, the governor is acting under the authority given to him by the legislature many years ago to deal with emergency situations. Of course, no one could have predicted that someone would abuse a statute created to help our state cope with a short-term emergency to lock out the legislative branch for more than 7 months. I think most Kentuckians believe that one person should not have the authority to shut our state down for weeks at a time. And to compound that feeling, many of the executive orders have been inconsistent and arbitrary. For example, you could drive through a restaurant for burger and fries. You could go shop at big box retailers with hundreds of people that were still open. However, you couldn't worship in person. And while those big box retailers were still open, independent business owners were forced to shutter and sit at home. Kentuckians could have parties with 50 people, but an agritourism site with hundreds of acres could only have a handful of customers at one time. And this week's orders and guidelines are equally inconsistent. The governor has limited the number of people to a venue of 25, regardless of the size and capabilities of the site that they are using. Indoor dining at restaurants is closed, but you can still shop at those big box retailers with hundreds of others of people. Now, we're not saying that we want these things shut down. These are just examples of the inconsistent and arbitrary actions of this governor. We believe that the great people of Kentucky are intelligent enough and caring enough to take care of themselves, their families, their friends, and their neighbors, given the appropriate information. What we have seen the past several months is government telling us as citizens that they know what is best for you and your family more than you do. And for the first time in my lifetime, and probably all of your lifetimes, the government is dictating what you can do in your own private home by telling you how many people that you can share Thanksgiving dinner with. We're hearing from local school leaders who have devoted countless hours to writing policies on how to handle this virus. Our children's safety is their number one priority, and now that authority has been taken away from them. We have not been provided any data or evidence that there are outbreaks in any of our public or private schools. And if there is data out there that points to these things, then I say, Governor, show us that data. The governor is simply making excuses without presenting all of the evidence. And so therefore, our caucus has been working on these issues for months, and last week's Supreme Court ruling has given us a direction. And we're going to continue down the path to redefine these emergency powers. And now I'd like to turn it over to Leader Stephen Rudy for some more comments.
I appreciate the opportunity to be with you all today, and before I talk about some things, yes, the caucus did elect me to be the floor leader of our majority yesterday. Truly an honor to get to serve in this capacity. Many of you know that I filled in for our floor leader last year, or earlier this year during session, in this role to some extent. And I want to give you an update on him. Bam Carney, my dear friend, who's been in the fight for his life since December the 23rd. It's been a roller coaster, ups and downs, but he's had some really good weeks. He continues to improve. He won his election comfortably with a lot of support, and as he sought to be reelected to the House of Representatives, and his constituents remain on his mind, but his recovery is first and foremost to him and his family, and so he knew he wouldn't be able to serve in this capacity, and I was honored to step in for him and pick up the torch now that he's passed it on. But he will, we fully anticipate a complete recovery from our good friend Leader Carney, Representative Carney, Bam, who we all know and love, and look forward to the day that he returns back through the House door. You know, as we look at this session, the Speaker alluded to it, one of the big things is going to be the budget, and I've been involved in crafting the last two budgets more so than I had been my previous 12 years in the General Assembly than the others, but We've done budgets in short years before. My first session here, 2005, the General Assembly had failed to pass a budget the year before that, so we did a one-year budget plus tax modernization by then Governor Fletcher taking the lead on that. So, I think that, and that was with two different parties in two different chambers. Now, there wasn't a pandemic going on, so, we always will have different constraints, but I'm convinced that we can get our work done. We will pass a responsible budget, and we will take the resources that the taxpayers send here and make those decisions. But I think one of the opportunities that we've missed over this last few months since we've left, and just a lot of questions from this administration about opportunities squandered. I mean, we keep hearing things about $20 million that's been spent for contact tracing, and we don't have any data available for reports for our local health departments, and it's really just been questionable about how some of this money has been spent here. $7 million for a field hospital in Lexington that was never opened, never treated one single patient. $16 million to Ernst & Young to help process unemployment claims, and I still get calls, and many of our new members, 21 new members, they're already getting calls, people wanting help with their unemployment, and this goes back to April. I mean, look, I know it's unprecedented, it's hard, but I mean, surely by now, and if we spent $16 million with this group, what did they do? And then now we got a new $40 million initiative to bail out restaurants, which will not even make a dent in the problem of what they're facing. And it does, they're going to have to lay off employees. And we're not the federal government. We can't pass payroll protection here. We'll do what we can in resources. But I mean, just to be arbitrary and inconsistent and then say, oh, here's $40 million, and how long will it take to process that? You've got to, these same people that laid people off earlier that still hadn't been paid that back pay for unemployment. We got our work cut out for us to do, but I'm convinced that we will get the job done right. We will get it done in a timely fashion, and we will get Kentucky through this pandemic, but we must get us back on the path to prosperity and get the government out of the way and let the people of Kentucky get back to work. I will now turn it over to my friend, our caucus chair, Suzanne Miles.
Thank you all for coming out today. And I think that whenever we're addressing a lot of the issues we're talking about, I don't think that there is any one item that is probably the most concerning with the emergency powers that have taken place would be the unemployment insurance. We are currently, the last administration numbers that we received were 73,000 that are still unprocessed. And that is just frightening to think of. And then the additional mandates this week, we all know that that's going to exacerbate that number, and very concerned about the people that are going along with that. I think we can all attest that we have all been receiving calls ever since March of this past year. We have a lot of returning members that are still receiving large amounts of calls, and then our new members have just been flooded with the new calls from their constituents asking for help, for any way they can come up with help with the unemployment insurance. We are struggling with that. I think that we do want to be in the room and have that conversation and work towards solutions to come up with helping our constituents any way we can. If we cannot affect their physical and mental, their financial help that we need to give them, then I don't know what we can do. So I will, at this point in time, turn it over to our Majority Whip, Chad McCoy.
Good morning. Thank you all for coming out this morning. We've spent the last probably 9 months, ever since COVID really fired up, traveling around the state as a leadership team, listening, having business roundtables. And we've heard just from countless businesses, schools, churches, nonprofits, you name it. They're scared. They're trying to figure out, how are we going to go forward now in the face of this fear of liability? They're worried that what if a customer gets COVID, or am I going to get sued? What if something happens in our school? And I think that fear is probably pretty justified, given that every day we seem to get very different and sometimes conflicting regulations and rules coming down, whether it's the CDC, whether it's the governor, the health department, whatever. So what you saw us do last year as the pandemic was sort of exploding, we were able to get in with Senate Bill 150, craft some liability protection. But as that has gone on, what we've realized is, number one, it was limited in its time. It was only during the declaration of a pandemic. And it was also probably too narrow in scope. It was only addressing people that were making PPE and our healthcare workers. So building on that foundation of what we did in Senate Bill 150, hopefully in the next session, you're going to see very early on us roll out some liability protection in that same vein for everybody. Because we want to make sure our businesses, our schools, our churches understand that they can go forward and life can go on without fear. Thank you. I think we're going to turn it over to questions now.
Thank you. We will open it up for a few questions.
Speaker,
Lawrence.
or anyone who wants to answer this, you mentioned lack of data. Flesh that out. For example, have you seen any data, has the governor made any information available that would trace cases back to restaurants and bars, for example, that have been closed?
We've not seen any data to support that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but we have not seen it if it does exist.
And a follow-up question, we're also getting concerns about what you're calling arbitrary application of the rules. For example, restaurants, bars are closed, but historical racing venues are open at apparently 75%. What are you hearing there?
Well, I think one of the major concerns that we have heard day after day, ever since the shutdown began in March, is the inconsistent application. People feel that they're being treated unfairly, or they're being others are being given preferential treatment. And I think that when you don't involve the voices of the stakeholders, I think that limits your buy-in. And it doesn't mean that the outcomes may necessarily be different, but assuming that what this governor has implemented is appropriate, it's still reliant upon compliance of the people that the edicts are being given to. You don't get compliance, you don't get buy-in by making orders. You get compliance by getting buy-in. And people need to feel like they are part of this conversation. They need to feel like their voices are being heard. And we commit to doing that. I asked the question the other day on a conference call with former Leader Atkins, when they were talking about the number 25 in a room. And I asked if that room was LaGrange Elementary cafeteria or Rupp Arena, was that number the same? They had no answer for it. That is absurd to operate with that degree of ambiguity when people's lives are on the line and people's jobs are on the line and people are trying to make business decisions. And we also know from the press conferences that were being held the last 4 or 5 days that these plans are in the work. I heard from restaurateurs probably a dozen times yesterday that they had to place their orders for Thanksgiving through their purveyors this past Monday. That was their deadline. To not give those people the heads up it's inconsiderate, at least, of the challenges that, and I think it shows a complete lack of understanding of what businesses and families are going through every single day in this Commonwealth.
Are there some specific measures that you're looking at to curtail executive powers and states of emergency declarations?
We have had, as everybody knows, we've had several members that have pre-filed legislation that would curtail emergency powers in some degree. About 4 months ago, I put together a working group that would try to find consensus among those bills, look at what other states do, and try to find good long-term policy. I think that clearly there are two parts of the emergency powers issue. One is the use of them. The other is the fact that they're poorly defined. Certainly, these emergency powers never contemplated something that would extend for 9 months. No way it could have contemplated that. Nobody would ever insinuate that. They were contemplated to consider natural disaster, terrorist attacks, things that would be limited in either geographic area or limited in time. And I think now we see that there is a need to consider the long-term implications, and so we will provide some clarity in that, and hopefully, again, build long-term policy, good long-term policy. Chris?
Speaker, getting to that point, those who support the governor or Democrats in the state who are not supportive of the supermajority in the House or the Senate may question the efforts to rein in the governor's powers as just a power grab by Republicans who really don't care about doing the right thing. They just care about having the power to do this. You just talked about how to get things done, the governor needs compliance. He needs people to feel like they're being listened to. How do you plan to move forward with impacting the executive powers in such a way that people feel like you're not just going after a power grab? Is this a power grab, or do you really care about listening to the people who feel like they're not being listened to now?
You know, every single time that this governor has been questioned throughout this process, he's accused us of playing politics. I think clearly during this last political cycle, he made it all too obvious that he was the one that decided to get involved in politics. He raised money for candidates, he recruited candidates, he endorsed candidates, he appeared in commercials for candidates, and every single time he lost. I think that the fact that the citizens of Kentucky, from one end of the state to the other, in urban areas, in suburban areas, in rural areas, elected a Republican legislature, they expect us to govern, and we're going to govern.
Regarding the legislative calendar, I know you have to be done by a certain day and you only have a certain amount of days to get to that deadline. Is there any flexibility in terms of like whether you can move some of the days up into January and meet more days in January? And is there even an imperative to do more sooner?
We are definitely looking at the calendar and how we will utilize the calendar. Again, as you noted, that we're limited to 30 days. The only thing that the only 3 requirements, or I guess 4 requirements of our session is we have to convene the first Tuesday after the first Monday after January 1st. We have to, at some point in time, take a break. And then we have to reconvene in February. It gives us a specific date that we have to reconvene. How we utilize that interim period is not defined. So we do have the ability to draw days in, and then we have to be finished by the end of March.
Speaker, we have these sent-in questions too, and this has to do with the timeline as well. Do you think there's a possibility that the House and Senate both pass a bill omitting the governor's emergency powers under Chapter 39A in the first week of session, or will this be a longer process that goes into February and March to find consensus on a specific bill?
I think it's difficult to answer that specifically because we have, as I said, we have put together a working group that is looking at building the best long-term policy. And that is policy that will affect this governor, the next governor, and hopefully the next 20 governors. Our goal, as it has always been, is to pass good long-term policy that will stand the test of time. We will pass that when it's ready. If that is the first week, then that will be the first week. If it's not ready the first week, then it won't be the first week.
And another question regarding the legislature. How does the legislature plan to meet if the governor issues orders that prevent groups of this size?
First of all, the Constitution is the guiding light of our society. The Constitution requires us to meet. We will be here. We will be here doing our job. We are asking people every single day across the state to go to work when they can and how they can. Our members will be here ready to go to work January the 5th. How we will meet is a different animal, and one that we are continuing to work on. We are consulting with scientists, with public health officials, to try to provide the best possible environment that we can work in during session, and keeping our staff considerations, their health considerations, our members' health and safety. For example, this is our caucus meeting room. We now have 75 members. Clearly, there is no way to put 75 members in this room. We've now done a tour of the building and the building across the street, and there's actually not a room in the Capitol complex other than the House chambers and that's utilizing the gallery where we can maintain social distancing. So clearly, it is going to be a difficult environment to work in, but we will do it. We will find a way to do it, and we will do it as safely as possible. I do think it's interesting that under the governor's recent order, he did allow for Senate Democrats to meet for Thanksgiving dinner. And he did allow House Democrats to meet in any venue in Kentucky because he limited that to 25. But we will certainly figure out a way to do it. And again, it's not going to be easy, but we will do it. I will tell you that we've made significant technological upgrades. Our IT folks here at LRC have done a phenomenal job of updating our software. We now have the ability for members to vote from their offices. They will be able to actually register votes on the floor directly in real time. They will still have to be in Frankfurt. They have to be sitting at their desk with their desktop computer to do so, but they will have that ability. So people that don't feel safe going to the floor, that don't want to go to the floor, they're perfectly able to sit, observe the proceedings. They will have to go to the floor to speak if they want to speak on something, but we will make provisions for those people to come to the floor as well. Yes.
There are some who criticize criticism of the governor's restrictions without an alternative detailed plan being laid out. They're saying, well, if you don't like what the governor is doing, what do you propose? Would you mind walking us through a plan that the Republicans have to tackle this?
Well, when we left Frankfurt, we passed a plan. When we left Frankfurt in March, we passed a plan that would convene the hospital associations to present how they would comply with CDC requirements, present those to the cabinet officials, present those to the governor for approval or modification, individualized plans, not broad brush plans that treat every single business in Paducah the same as they do in Pikeville or Louisville. We empowered the Restaurant Association to allow their members to design how they would comply with CDC standards. I was in a restaurant the other night that is about 17,000 square feet. And they now have the same restrictions as the coffee shop around the corner from my apartment here in Frankfurt. That's not being responsible. That's not a responsible way to handle government. We've got to be more strategic. We've got to be more precise. As far as the criticisms go, there's going to be criticisms of everything. These are very, very difficult decisions. But criticisms is how we govern. Exchange is how we govern. Bringing people together, exchanging ideas, arguing, debating, that is how we govern. That's what makes us different than other societies that pick up arms and fight this out on a battlefield. If we can't have an honest exchange of information without being accused of being for a power grab or being overtly political, then we've lost sight of how we actually govern and how we should govern responsibly. And a large degree of our frustration that we expressed just this week when the new restrictions were handed down was that it was being reported that we were being consulted on it. And look, I'm happy to be part of the process. I am thrilled and want to be part of the discussion, but I'm not willing to be part of the charade. If I'm going to be a part of the discussion, I'll be a part of the discussion. If I'm not going to be it, I'm not going to be a cover for you.
Follow up to my question. You point to the plan that you guys had. Respectfully, that was several months ago. The virus has evolved. Our situation has evolved over time. Do you believe that plan still stands a few months later?
Obviously, we've continued to work on other things that would, again, involve stakeholders to say what works best for individual businesses, for individual schools. We know that what works. I've spoken to my own school superintendent. What will work in one of his schools will not work in other schools. Give him the flexibility that he needs to educate kids.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions that
We've
have
got a
been
couple
sent
more
in.
sent-in questions. Will comprehensive tax reform be on the House's agenda this session? What about additional revenue measures like sports gaming?
Tax reform is always a long-term goal of this legislature, this majority. It was certainly more in center focus prior to COVID. As I said, we had record revenues coming into the Commonwealth, and the ability to tackle comprehensive tax reform with strong revenues is kind of an ideal situation. I think that one of the reasons for failure of all of the blue ribbon commissions, the white papers that have been written, is they've all been written contemplating how to raise revenue. And I think that's how you raise taxes. That's not how you make good long-term policy. So it will continue to be on the agenda. It will continue to be part of the discussion. I think in times of uncertainty, it makes it very, very difficult to enact comprehensive tax reform.
And our last sentence question. Last session, you had a lot of pressure to adjourn early, but stayed in. What do you say to those critics about staying in?
We are here to do our job. We will do our job. There very well may be some, we got caught up early on in the definition of essential versus not essential employees. I will tell you that nobody likes to be considered non-essential. There may be some of our legislators that feel like they aren't essential, and I would advise them to find another line of work, because we're going to be here doing our job.
You didn't answer the question about gaming. Will there be gaming, gambling, or medical marijuana this session going through the House?
I think that certainly, and I apologize, John, for not getting the second part of that question. That was a significant part of the conversation last year. As you know, we passed medical marijuana through the House with a relatively large margin. So I think that certainly there will be some support for that. Whether or not that support is in the Senate, I think that's kind of where it showed where the stumbling block was there. Had considerable interest in the sports gaming issue. A lot of support for it. We have 21 new members. It's difficult. We don't know where they are on those issues yet. We will convene our caucus retreat in a couple weeks and start building that. But I am sure it will be part of the conversation, absolutely. And I know that there will continue to be some support for it.
What about expanded gaming?
I think that's part of the same conversation, truthfully. Or it will happen during the same conversation.
You touched on the question I had. You have 21 new members. How does that change the dynamic for those kinds of issues like medical marijuana?
Well, certainly it provides new voices. And, in addition to 21 new voices, it's 13 additional voices. Instead of 62, we've got 75. So I think that gives us additional cushions when we need votes. So it changes from that perspective. But it also allowing people to learn the process. There are some of these issues that will be coming at these new members that they've never contemplated. And I think to give them the tools that they need to make the best decisions they possibly can. It's going to be difficult in this environment, and certainly during a challenging time. But we faced a similar circumstance in 2017 when we came in with 27 new members. And one of the things that we as a leadership team at that point pondered was how much could we do early on, given that lack of experience. And it really did concern us as to whether the aggressive agenda that we set forth was going to be attainable. And we quickly found out that those reservations were unfounded, because the enthusiasm and the excitement and the optimism that those people brought was overwhelming. I know that Whip McCoy was one of that group, and we sat with them at the very first caucus retreat and talked about these things, and there were several of them that stood up and said, "Look, you told us we were going to change Kentucky. That's what we're here to do, and that's what we're going to do." So.
Who will be the new A&R chair?
We are continuing to have those conversations. We met last night as a leadership team to begin those conversations, and we will continue those today in filling all our chairmanships.
Darrell, I want to follow up on something Speaker Pro Tem Meade said. He said something about giving people information they need to take care of themselves. Does that indicate a preference for suggestions as opposed to mandates when it comes to dealing with this virus?
I don't know. I'll let him expand on his comments there.
Yes, I absolutely believe that that's what we should do. We should give them that information, tell them what precautions they should take, give them the suggestions instead of these mandates, because no one can take care of your family better than you can. The government can't do it. The government's never been able to do it. And so, we just feel that these mandates have been arbitrary and inconsistent. And the people of Kentucky, as I said, they are intelligent enough and caring enough to take care of themselves, their families, their friends, and their neighbors if they're given that appropriate information.
Are you all saying there shouldn't have been anything shut down at all? You think there should have been some things shut down, or maybe a more careful look at that? What do you exactly are about the shutdowns?
I think originally, we all will agree that when he originally shut everything down for that first couple of weeks. That was the appropriate thing to do. We didn't know anything about the virus. It was to get out the information, to get out the precautions that people needed to take. But we needed to immediately start opening those places back up. And now, as you see, especially in my district, when I go in stores and restaurants and gas stations, all of them are requiring masks. They're taking their own precautions, and they are protecting the people that are coming into their businesses. And I believe that that is the way that we should continue to operate.
I have another question, just general question about your priorities as Mr. Speaker. What about criminal justice reform, specifically some of the things coming out of the Breonna Taylor case and removal?
We were actually having very productive conversations with that. I know that President Stivers has convened a group of Senate leaders, including Leader McGarvey, to work on some of those issues. I'm aware that Metro Council passed their Citizens Review Panel board. I think that there is a strong interest and desire to come with some real bipartisan solutions, and I think there's great opportunity for that.
You're talking about some of the things they need the state to do in order to make that more effective, like their new position that they're creating, Inspector General.
As far as the particulars of that, I think that you will find great support for the Citizens Review Panel. One of the things that has been part of that discussion is having subpoena power for that Citizens Review Panel. I think that's something that requires a little bit more thought. I might ask Chad to speak on that as far as the particulars of subpoena power for Citizens Review Panels.
Yeah, we haven't seen the particulars of what they did last night, but in concept, it's very odd to have civilians have government subpoena power without any sort of judicial oversight. If you look, the Fourth Amendment kind of search and seizure things, you're always going to see a neutral and detached magistrate being involved in those decisions. And so I think there's some areas to be concerned about as we look at that going forward.
Okay, anything else from anybody else? Okay, I think we had another send-in question, but I think Tom doubled down on it, so we're good there. Thank you guys very much. All right.
Thank you all.